Good. So
Good.
I think we're supposed to be on Instagram now live. So
We
hopefully it's getting
are
to everyone.
allegedly. I mean, oh wait, hold on. We are. Oh my God. Okay.
Whoa, that's like throwback now.
Okay. Wow, that was exciting. So, in any event, we're talking sexual orientation OCD again today. Specifically, we will be talking about compulsions, and we're excited to do that and thrilled to answer any of your questions if you want to throw them in the chat, um, specifically related to this topic, of course.
Yes.
Yes.
So just to recap last podcast, I was going to say last session.
I like it.
Yeah. Last session, just kidding. This is not therapy. This is for
Nope.
educational purposes only. But we were talking about the obsessions around sexual orientation OCD that are very common. And just briefly, if you haven't seen it, you can go back, but we'll recap it. So it's any intrusive, unwanted thoughts around whether or not your sexual orientation preference is what it typically would be.
Like what you identify as.
What you identify as, right.
Yep. Yep.
And we went over, like, you could identify as heterosexual, but have obsessions around what if I'm bisexual? What if I'm gay? And you can be bisexual and have obsessions around what if I'm heterosexual? What if I'm gay? And all the other iterations of that.
Yes, exactly. So just the idea is like, what if I'm lying to
Mhm.
myself and everyone else? And sometimes in terms of like the core fear, like, or the sort of central concern there, it's like, what if I hurt my partner? What if I, live a lie? Like these are the sort of long-term ramifications that people are worried about because they're like the anxiety about what if I'm misidentifying?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the moral aspect, the relationship aspect, all the different variations that come into play.
Yeah, and you were bringing up existential concerns last time
Mhm.
and how that kind of weaves in as well. Um, so, with all of that said, what are some of the common compulsions that you see at play with this particular subtype?
I think the most common would be the groinal checking,
Mm,
right? Like, am I aroused? Do I feel a arousal or attraction towards this person?
yep.
And kind of checking in with the groin area. So that's what groinal checking is. It's like you just focus on the groin area,
That's it.
and
Yep.
shocking something either happens or it doesn't, and it's all terrifying either direction. So
Yes, absolutely. Um, I think too, one of the interesting things here is that the groin can be either a trigger in this subtype, or it can be something that becomes compulsive, like the checking of it.
mhm.
And oftentimes the checking will happen after you've been triggered by it at some point. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, wait, but is it moving again, or can I feel something again? Because last time I did feel something, and that, etc.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's important to note that like the groinal response would be a trigger. The groinal check would be a compulsion. So it's like the referencing of it and like I don't know why whenever I think of like internal checking, my face always does like, it's like your
Groinal
eyes look
checking?
up and you're like, huh.
Like
That's
a is it a barometer that checks, like, the
yeah.
humidity and the
Yeah.
temperature? It does all of it.
Yeah. Something like that. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what it
I don't know.
measures, but it measures something. Damn it.
Measures groinal checking
That's
this
what
whole
barometer.
time.
We didn't even know. It was about, yeah, barometers. Well, there you go.
Yeah. The
Um,
meteorologists were wrong.
and they, I don't even think it has to do with meeting. Well, I guess it does. I
Yeah,
don't
the
know.
weatherman or lady.
Yeah, that's true because it's like
Anyways.
pressure. Wow, this is a rabbit hole that we could really go down.
Yeah,
But instead, lest we digress,
we do.
um, so yeah, groins get involved, right? Because there's concerns about whether or not you're aroused by certain things and what that may or may not mean about you.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's a checking example, and there can also be like the reassurance seeking aspect.
Yep.
So additionally to just the groinal checking, reassurance can go in terms of like, hey, have you ever had thoughts about this to somebody? Like, have you ever had thoughts that maybe you would be attracted, and asking your friends or family, or hey, asking your parents, like, was I attracted to fill in the sexual orientation preference,
Mhm. Yep.
and getting some type of reassurance that way.
Yep, and then I think also this is where some sneaky reassurance seeking can come in.
Mm,
Um, Oftentimes it's like, "Well, but you've noticed when somebody of the same sex or different depending on what the concern is, like,
mhm,
you've been able to note it." Let's take the example of a gay man, right? Somebody who's a male who's identifies as gay might say, "Yeah, but you can tell when a straight woman is pretty, right? Or you
yeah.
can tell when they're attractive, right?" And it's almost like you could do it without the right at
Yeah,
the end.
you could actually
You just
just
say,
read the face,
"Yeah."
the nonverbals. Do they look alarmed, or do they look like, "Yeah, of course."
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then taking that read and going and putting it into the old
Computer.
brain hole,
Mm,
and seeing whether or not, yeah, like as feedback. And so that's something that comes up a fair amount with this as well. Is
for
like, and it's interesting, right? Because when we're working with clients with this subtype or with any subtype, there is some psychoeducation about the content. Even though we're all, it's not about the content, it's not about the content. Oftentimes we'll say, like, there's something called the Kinsey scale, and there's a sort of a broad spectrum when it comes to sexual identification. And so most people are neither 100% gay nor 100% straight. So, like, we're going to educate people about that to help them to be with this sort of nebulousness, which is sexuality, hopefully. However, sometimes they can actually use that to reassure themselves, or in discussion with others. You could see somebody going, "Oh, yeah, but like, the Kinsey scale. So we're all a little
yeah,
bit straight. We're all a little
right,
bit gay. We're whatever the
right.
thing is." Um, yeah, and even though that's probably not for the best for people.
Mm-mm. Right. It yeah, it's tricky because anything can become compulsive, so
Sure,
that's an
absolutely.
example of it going haywire.
Yeah, and I think specifically an example of like education that may come up in therapy becoming compulsive. Like if you're
Mhm,
repeating that over and over again to remind yourself that you are not whatever
mhm,
sexual orientation you're afraid you are. Um, and
right,
so I think remembering too that this element of compulsivity is about repetition, right? It's excessive. It's not, to your point, any behavior can be compulsive. Any behavior might not be compulsive in theory. It's that it's excessive,
urgent, yeah,
urgent. Yeah, those qualities make it compulsive.
right. Its prime directive is to obliterate the fear associated with the obsession.
Whoa. The
Yeah,
prime directive
prime
is to
directive.
obliterate.
Uh-huh.
Wow. I'm gonna have to start dinging
I
some bells
mean,
over here for SAT words, man.
well, but I mean, I think it's just an aggressive way of explaining it because it is so aggressive and it feels so aggressive,
It
but,
does. It does feel
um
aggressive.
and going into more compulsions, I would say, like, avoidance is a huge one with this.
Mhm.
So it could be, like, avoiding any shows that may trigger you,
Mhm.
um, avoiding hanging out with certain people that you find, like, attractive, avoiding sexual encounters as well, which can
Mm.
impact relationships pretty deeply,
Yeah.
because we're trying to avoid, am I aroused? And also, intrusive images that can come with this obsession.
Yep. I think too with avoiding sex, oftentimes that's because it's such a miserable experience, not only because of the intrusive images or thoughts, but also because people end up going way down the rabbit hole in terms of compulsing, right? Mentally
Yeah.
compulsing, and the checking of the physical, like the groinal check happens during sex, or am I feeling connected right now, whatever that means, or however one measures that. So there's like it's
Yeah,
even
anxiety
fewer.
gets in the way too. Yeah,
Yes.
it's like
Yeah.
the side effect of it.
Yeah.
So, good luck enjoying sex if you're stuck in an obsession and then also feeling anxious, and then your therapist is like, "Maybe you should go home and have sex with that person." Then you're like, "Wow, okay.
Really? Should
That's
I? Should
not
I?
what I wanted to do today."
Thank you. Although, so this is really important though, because as we talk about so often, the exposure is only as good as the response prevention that you do, because
Mhm.
otherwise you're just triggering yourself and really causing yourself pain. So before you do these kinds of exposures, right? Like, and I'm sure you're talking about this with your therapist, go with what they're saying. But generally speaking, we don't want you to start taking on exposures before you're ready to do the response prevention. And so, with like sex, take sex for an example, we don't want you necessarily diving in there if you don't have some mechanism for disengaging from the mental compulsions and going, I don't know. So sometimes there can be a little bit of psychoeducation, a little
Yep,
bit of work with other, yeah, with other exposures before we get to something like that.
definitely.
Yeah.
And just to piggyback off of that, I would say that the response prevention or the exposure is only good as the response prevention piece, but also knowing that exposures like that, there are gonna be a level of compulsivity that goes on, and that doesn't mean that the exposure wasn't worth doing, which I know you and I've talked about, but just as a reminder,
Yes. Yep.
that can be a high octane exposure.
Oh, can it?
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
actually, it's really interesting because so Laura of OCD Doodles, which is a
Mhm.
great account on Instagram if you don't follow it. She posts awesome educational
Yeah.
material and just great little artwork. But she's doing this series for the holiday season, and in it, one of the things that she posted was that like you can always make the choice to drop compulsions. Basically, I'm paraphrasing through my own lens, but I really appreciated that she said that. Like, it doesn't matter how far down the rabbit hole you've gone. And this is certainly the case when you're doing something like having sex and you have this tendency to ruminate. Doesn't matter how far you've gone or how long you've been disengaged, you
Right.
always have the chance to come back to the
Yeah.
present moment and the physical sensations of the present moment.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a good reminder
Yeah.
for all things compulsive, for sure.
Yes. Yeah. So just piggyback off of your piggyback.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's like an aggressive piggyback
Piggyback.
situation
I know.
happening. I like it.
Um, I was going to say something about avoidance.
Hmm. You might also, can I throw something? Sorry.
No, do it.
Avoidance can happen of people of a certain sexual orientation as well. So let's
Mhm,
say that you're gay, you have anxiety that you might be straight, you might avoid uh, heterosexual people of the opposite sex
mhm.
because you're afraid that, like, if you're around them, then maybe you'll realize that you are actually straight.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they also may avoid, like, certain, like, OCD groups too, like, what if somebody, is gay in there and then they make me gay and right?
Mm,
Like, there's all that's true for a lot of obsessions too, where, like, what if they give me their obsession or what if they
sort of like a magical thinking kind of thing.
right,
That
right.
there's like a
Like, you can catch any of this, like, it's
right,
contagious, and it's
right.
not.
Yeah. Yep.
Like,
Which
going to a gay parade or, like, gay pride parade, like, okay, well, pretty sure that's not how that works, folks.
no. I can confirm as somebody who identifies as straight, who's been to a lot of gay pride parades, that
Yes.
actually I mean, I haven't yet anyway, so but
So far, but we don't know.
I think it's actually really important that we touch upon this as well. And I can't remember if we actually talked about this last time when we were talking about obsessions, but um, this maybe we did. This used to be, referred to as HOCD, which was for homosexual OCD, and
Yeah.
that it's a total misnomer. Yeah, we did talk about that. Um, but I think just pointing out here too, when you're doing exposures, right? Like, and as we're talking about this, eh, it's I just want to acknowledge that if we say something like you can catch it, right? Like it's less because it's less stigmatized to be straight. It's like saying like, oh, well, you might be afraid that you could catch being straight. That there's a little bit of a different, it hits different when you say like, I'm afraid that I could be like, I could catch being gay, because
Mhm.
of course we live in a society that, gay people have been marginalized for such a long time.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge on here too that neither Kelley nor I endorse any sort of marginalization.
Mm-mm.
um, and we also have to talk about how these thoughts come up, and how sometimes there's avoidance that is related to, that may reflect the world in which we live, which, still unfortunately there
Mm.
are some, there are a fair amount of biases that exist, and yeah.
That's true. Good
Anyway,
point.
just felt important to acknowledge. Hopefully I didn't do too clumsy a job of it, but
No, you did great. That was really important
yeah.
to point out.
Oh,
Um, I remembered what it was I was gonna
the
say
avoidance.
was well, not exactly. It was going off of confessing,
Mm,
so there may be a lot of confessing with partner, like, "Hey," like, I guess the sex thing ignited that in my brain is like, "I'm sorry I'm so anxious. I was having these thoughts about this," and, like, "Do you think I'm gay?" Or, "I'm just telling you because I have, like, this moral drive," that goes back to the original episode we had last time we met, which is, "I'm duping my partner, I'm doing something immoral, so I'm going to confess to them that I was actually trying to figure out whether I'm gay or not, or straight or not."
yes. Yes.
So,
Exactly, because then I'm off the hook, as we
I'm
talked
off
about
the
last
hook.
time. Yeah, like more, but yeah. Yep.
Or maybe we can talk through it because they know me as well, and we can figure it out together.
A little co-rumination.
Yeah.
Yeah. No big deal. No
Yeah.
big deal. Um, what else? What else? So we've talked, I mean, we didn't do a deep dive yet, I guess, into the different ways that it can show up within the context of mental compulsions.
Yeah, true.
Um, we talked about sort of emotionally checking, as well as physically sort of checking your experience internally, your interoceptive awareness of the
Mhm,
experience.
mhm.
But what other compulsions do we see in that arena?
In the mental compulsions.
Hmm.
I mean, I think a lot of it is can be comparing,
Mm,
comparing certain feelings to other feelings. So, like, the relationship I'm in now compared to my attraction I had with this person. Do I feel something?
mm.
Do I like it? It's more like thinking through the process of it.
Yes.
What would my life be like? And visualizing in the future, like, okay, what if I break up with my partner now and I decide I want to identify as heterosexual, straight? So now I'm envisioning my life with somebody who is also straight. And now we've gone down a huge rabbit hole.
Yes, and I really appreciate, because I was going to talk about mental review, but what you're saying is absolutely spot on. That comparison is really what's happening, right? Even if you're reviewing an experience, usually, like to see whether or not you had a feeling, it's to compare it to what you think you should be experiencing,
Yeah,
or whether or not, yeah, the experience is reflective of how you're identifying. So
exactly.
yeah. So there's some comparison inherent
Hmm.
to that.
Any other mental, I mean, there's probably a gazillion different compulsions that we could get into.
Right. No, I mean, I think that those are the main, like rehearsing, reviewing experiences.
Yeah, like how will I act when I go to this party, how am I, like, rehearsing it in your mind? Is that what you mean?
Yes, and also sort of like the fantasy rehearsal, like, okay,
Mhm,
well, what would this be like? And would I be happy in this? And would I enjoy being with this type of person and that kind of thing?
mhm,
Which
mhm.
is where you can see it's all a jumbled bunch anyway, because if you're like, "Oh, would I enjoy that?" You're emotionally checking.
Right.
So it's yeah, it's rehearsing for the future, but you're also checking. It's all
I know.
the question is, are you trying to figure out your sexual orientation when you've tried to figure it out 900,500,000 times?
Yeah. Good
Don't
luck. You're
yeah.
not gonna find an answer.
No, no, and that's I mean, obviously there is no certainty, but as I think we spoke to last time, it's just when you're talking about something as nebulous as sexual orientation, it's it's impossible.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to fit into a box, and I think it's only now that our culture, westernized culture, has even begun to scratch the top of the conversations around, like, that you can't be it's not a binary experience, that sexuality is on a continuum, and everyone fits in different places, but you don't know your exact percentage, and you never will because that doesn't exist.
Nope. It's an illusion, gang.
Right.
Sorry.
Mhm.
Gosh, we're such bummers. We always
I know. Sorry.
Sorry. No, but honestly, it's ultimately good news because learning
Mhm.
to live with the fact that there are no answers, it's freedom.
Yeah, it's so true.
So this probably doesn't sound great if you're new to this realm, but trust us. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, you get to say, "Oh, no, thank you. I'm not going to do that today."
I would
And then
prefer
you get to
not to spend
do
my day trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard because I think that it seems as though the answer is to figure it out. And so when we're like, "Oh, we're going to stop trying to figure it out," people are kind of flummoxed by that and
Mhm.
are not pleased. But
Mm.
understanding that the problem is in the trying to figure it out, not in the fact that you haven't figured it out is really crucial as well.
Right.
Yeah.
You will never wake up and go like, "Oh, today I realized I am a lizard or
Well,
an owl." It doesn't work that way. You're just a human who's living on the spectrum.
yeah. Yeah. Well, or, maybe you will.
I guess that's true. Yeah, you could. You could.
Actually, this is so off topic, but there's a person on or not well, I can't remember how it's on Instagram. There's a person I think who has a lot of body alterations, and I can't remember how they identify, but it's almost alien maybe. Anyway, long of the short of it is, and I'm not trying to draw a parallel here, that anything is possible. You could
That's
wake up any day and think like,
I think
and
your DNA is still the same, though.
I do too. That's
Yeah,
true. Yeah. Legit.
maybe.
Anyway, like I said, that's random and totally unrelated
Yeah.
to the topic at
You
hand.
can get really close to being a lizard, I suppose, or an alien or
Yeah, well, with all of the technology that exists these days, but
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Well, any other parting thoughts, my friend?
I don't think so. I think the end is just saying we don't know, we don't have the answer to any of this, and really trusting the process, jumping in and saying, "I'm gonna just radically accept that maybe," and move on.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one thing I'll throw in there is because we were talking about it in the context of existential concerns and like living your life right. On another level, right? Existential concerns can involve like, are we even alive, as we've talked about before?
Mhm.
And I just want to say, if we can't even prove definitively that we're alive, then how in the world are we supposed to prove definitively? Like I said before, something as nebulous as am I identified with my authentic sexual orientation or am I in the right relationship? Like these questions are way too blurry. And like there are no clear
Yeah,
answers
there's no
for
exact
anyone.
no.
So understanding that, I think, helps us back off and say like, nope, I'm good. Like you were saying, I'm good. I'm not going to figure out
Yeah,
today. I got other things to do. Thank you.
yeah,
Goodbye.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
there's a little more space and peace around it, and, "Okay, I don't need to do this."
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, as always, thanks to those who joined us, and thank you,
Thank you.
friend. Love having these chats with you.
Yeah,
We'll see you in the new year. We'll be back January the 15th at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time.
yes.
So we'll look forward to seeing you then. Happy 2024.
Yeah.
Weird.
Happy 2024.
All right. Adios.